Hello creative people, welcome back to the channel. This is Everly Green. I am a Spanish illustrator and today I'm going to show you how I like to organize my layers whenever I draw an illustration. But first, let's talk about layers in Procreate because understanding them will seriously level up your workflow. A great way to think about layers is to imagine paper cut art. In paper cut art, you build a picture by stacking pieces of paper, starting with the background and then layering shapes and details on top. Procreate works the same way. Each layer is like a transparent piece of paper where you can draw part of your image. You can stack them, rearrange them, and edit each one separately. The advantage is that in Procreate you are not stuck once a layer is down. You can move things around, you can change the colors, resize elements, or even hide layers without affecting the rest of your artwork. It's like having reusable, editable paper cutouts, which gives you more freedom to experiment and to make changes. So let's apply this knowledge and color one of my illustrations. And let's go to the Layers panel over here. The Layers panel in Procreate works a lot like building a scene with paper cutout art. In paper cutouts, you stack pieces of paper one on top of the other, starting with the background and layering details to create a full picture. The Layers panel in Procreate follows the same logic. Each layer holds a different part of your artwork and they stack from bottom to top. The lower layers sit behind the upper ones, just like in paper art. So I've got my sketch here, and when it's ready I usually set it to multiply and keep it near the top of my layer stack. That way it stays visible while I work underneath it. I also like to add a texture layer, usually a paper texture, which I also set to multiply, and I place this one right at the very top of my layers, so it affects the entire illustration. I like to do this because it gives everything a nice cohesive texture feel, like it's been printed on paper, but you can skip this step if you don't want that look. After that, I always follow the same order when coloring the elements of my illustration. I like to start by adding a blue background, which is nothing final, just a placeholder that I'll change later on. And I use blue because it softens the look of the canvas, making the colors I apply next feel a bit less harsh than they would against the bright white background. But again, if you like painting on a white background straight away, you can also skip this step. Next, I focus on the characters in my illustration. I always start with the people first, then move on to the pets, and then move on to the background. When I am coloring people, I like to follow a specific order. Skin first, then clothes, and finally hair. So I'm going to draw the skin on a layer just below the sketch, but above the background. Then I move on to the clothes, and I usually create separate layers for each clothing item, so the shirt goes on a layer below the skin, the belt goes below the shirt, and the trousers go below the belt. Finally, I color the hair on a layer that sits below both the skin and the clothes, but is still above the background. Now it's time to draw the face. For this, I used layers placed above the skin layer. I start with a layer for the eyes, then another layer for the nose, mouth and ears because they are a different color. And I also add a separate layer just for the blush. I like to set the blush layer to overlay, and that way it blends very nicely with the skin tone and it gives a softer, more natural look. Then I move on to the pets, and in this case the puppy is leaning on the girl, so I'm going to draw it on a layer above all the previous layers, but still below the sketch layer. Next, I'm going to create 3 new layers above the third layer to add the puppy's facial features. The eyes in one layer, the mouth in another layer, and the blush in another layer, again because they are 3 different colors for 3 different layers. And the blush layer I'm going to set to multiply so that it will blend nicely with the fur. And now I like to move on to the background. I'm going to start by drawing the blanket that they are resting on. That goes on a layer above the blue background, but below all the other layers. Once the blanket is done, I focus on the grass. I'm going to create a new layer below everything else for that, and at this point I can delete the blue background since I am not going to need it anymore. Now we only have the tree, the leaves and the flowers left. For the tree, it doesn't really matter where I place the layer, as long as it's above the background layer. Since it doesn't interact with the other elements of the illustration, I can safely tuck it right above the background and below everything else. That keeps it organized and out of the way. The flowers and the leaves, however, will sit on top of everything else. They'll be on the characters, they'll be on the blanket and the grass. So in this case I need to place them on layers above all the main illustration layers, but still below the sketch layer and the paper texture, so those elements stay visible on top. I'm going to create 2 layers, one for the leaves and one for the flowers. And to keep things organized and editable, I'm actually going to add a 3rd layer above the flowers, just for the center of the flowers. because again the center of the flowers is a different color and I like to add a different layer for a different color. So there we have it, all the colors are laid down, and as you can see, even though I didn't start with the background like you would in cut paper art, I still follow the same layering logic. The background sits on the bottom layer and all the other elements are stacked on top to build up the full illustration. I really hope this helped you see how powerful and useful layers can be in your workflow. So let me know in the comments if you organize your layers like this or if you have your own system. And if you found this video useful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Procreate tips. You can also follow me on Instagram at @everlygreenart, where I post all my work, including a nice little art challenge that you can use to practice your layering technique. Thank you so much for watching, have a lovely day and see you in the next video. Bye!